For Future Generations, Episode 8. It is Sunday the 16th. Thank you for joining us. I am Geoffrey. I am joined, as always, by my friend Sean. Sean, thanks for coming along.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
As
always, having myself, I guess.
Right. Yeah, hosting yourself. First off, thanks for doing this with me. Both of us have always wanted to do this, and it was just a matter of us finding each other and being like, hey, man, let's do it. So,
just send it.
Great. Just send it. Just send it. If no one else is doing it, do it yourself. So today, folks, we're going to be talking about what is an American and education. Public education and how ought a Christian to educate his children. So, Sean, let's see. Education was your topic, so you want to take it from the top and just go with it.
Yeah. So first off, the reason that this was on my mind is just conversations I've been having on social media, mainly Facebook. And I have come out in favor of school vouchers, the school voucher system, more in theory than any particular plan that is currently available. And I'll get to that. But I have come out and said that I'm a fan of the school voucher system. And the kind of pushback that I get is usually from what I would say are like the pie in the sky kind of Christians, usually self-proclaimed abolitionists, that kind of thing. Not that the two topics, not that the two topics are related, but it's just that general kind of person that's like everything is idealized and no compromise and like I said, pie in the sky. And part of that is we need to abolish public education, right? That's always the big, well, it's my way perfectly or the highway. And
as far as things that one could do, abolishing public education, at least getting the federal government out of it for sure, not a bad idea. But there are other fish to fry at the moment. You know,
so
we've got trannies walking around. I think we've got bigger problems.
My take on this, call it liberal, call it what you will. I think there needs to be a public education option. There has to be something there because there's always going to be the parents who are either too poor or they just don't care enough to do their own thing, whatever that is, whether it be homeschooling or like a what do they call it? The circuit when you have like multiple parents.
Oh yeah, co-op.
Like co-op. There you go.
Yeah,
I almost said commune. It's not a commune. It's co-op. There you go.
Similarities there, folks.
Yeah.
There's. I grew up in kind of a homeschooling community, as it were, high school on, and it was interesting when we had a local co-op that got big. One of the first things that happened was, they got this co-op and the moms were the teachers and they took turns teaching. And the next thing you know, they got a building and then they built, they incorporated a name and next thing you know, they're just a private school. It was like, well, you could have just done that, but
yeah. So I am a fan of the option being available. It is my take on that. It's not premium. It's not the best situation, but it needs to be available. To not bury the lead, I grew up in public school the whole time, and they say back then it wasn't so bad. I've actually heard that a lot from like kind of hey, millennials, I know you were only in school like 10 years ago or whatever, but it's not the same anymore. That's what they say. So anyways, the school voucher system got a lot of pushback on that. And so I wanted to talk about, first of all, there is this idea that gets put out that the American education system is somehow broken, not in a moral way, but that we're not teaching kids math. We're not teaching like science, like basic reading, stuff like that. There's this idea that the American public education system has failed. And I do not believe that. I believe that there is a much better explanation for what is going on with American public education numbers. And so we are going to share that. Let me see if I can pull this up. And I am trying to share. You seeing it?
This okay, so sometimes where I get disconnected, but let me try to. All right, so what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to open a new tab and do this over here. Click that. Now I should be able to send it. Okay. I don't know why this happens.
Are you sharing sometimes. It? There it is. Yeah.
There we go. Sorry about the technical difficulties, folks. We are using free software and it comes with quirks.
Yeah. So what you have is, I don't know this, what I assume is a woman, Vietnamese.
Not Nguyen.
Yeah. Clearly Vietnamese. I don't even know this person, but that's what that last name is. Genuinely cannot understand how America leads global tech while its education has worse outcomes than many developed and some developing countries. Well, in comes Steve Saylor, the ever-present statistics enthusiast who always has something to say.
Always the Twitter reply guy.
Now, this is a while back. This was August 9th of 2024. But I looked this up because I remember him bringing this up. And what Steve Saylor says is American 15-year-olds do quite well on the PISA International School Achievement Test, PISA International School Achievement Test. Our blacks, and this is Steve Saylor talking, he's very blunt, our blacks outscore all African and Caribbean countries. Our Latinos top all of Latin America. Our whites would rank among the top European countries, and our Asians are right behind Singapore. So what Steve Saylor's doing here is he's saying, if you compare the public education system by race, when he says our, he's just talking about American. So he's saying African Americans are we are outscoring Africa and Caribbean countries. Now, let me put a pin in that real quick. That is pretty sad because I would say that it's really just like black students alone that are creating these ridiculous numbers that you see where people say the public education system has failed. And it's simply not true. It's the same thing when people try to say, well, the public education system is failing the South, right?
Like, well, if you look
that's
at
not
the South,
actually true. Yeah, it's not actually true. If you break it down by race, you would get the same thing that Steve Saylor is saying here. So what he's saying is that African Americans outscore, full-blown Africans, or Caribbean countries he brings up because of the history of slavery, and there's a lot of African DNA in the Caribbean countries, and so he's bringing that up. Our Latinos top all of Latin America, so that one's pretty straightforward. I know that Latino and Hispanic have different technical definitions, but you know what he means when he says that. Our whites would rank among the top European countries. That's the one that people really love to compare us to, because you have in this original tweet that he's responding to, when he's talking about many developed countries. Well, what is a developed country? We're talking either majority white, so America, Canada, Australia, really former British colonies, and
with
Europe.
The exception of India and Pakistan.
Yeah. So white majority and
basically, English British colonies.
Right. And East Asia. That's the developed world. If you look up maps of where you can drink the tap water and not die,
Yeah,
that's it. It's
it
white
looks like a map
countries.
of the British Empire.
Yeah,
You know, with
it's
the
white.
Dutch, the Dutch and the Portuguese.
Yeah,
It's the colonized areas plus Europe.
right. And then East Asia. That I always got to throw
Hmm.
them in, like Japan, Japan, China, Korea. Um,
Yeah, but not even all of East Asia. That's one thing that is quite
well,
interesting.
the ones that
Um,
we call the ones that a normal person would know from East Asia, countries
mhm,
they've heard of,
yeah.
right? So, like, what East Asian countries would you say are
Do not
known?
have safe tap water. I mean, that would be like
Well, no,
the
no, no. I'm talking about
French.
as a developed country.
Oh, as a developed country.
Yeah,
Um, if I remember correctly, China is pretty questionable. But it's like,
yeah,
but that's because you're taking the country as a whole, and they've got like you know, the whole eastern coast of China is all very highly developed, highly technical. That's where most of your
yeah.
big cities are. Very
Right,
clean water, very clean streets. And then kind of western
right,
China, you've got the hills and the mountains and the desert, the huge, huge desert over there in
right.
western China. And if you average those out, you're like, oh well, they don't have clean tap water. It's
Yeah,
like, well, yeah, I mean, even in the United States, we have Flint, Michigan, but
yeah,
in China, Flint, Michigan
yeah.
looms large because it's half of their land mass is this untamed area.
Right.
But it's a
So
little bit
all
of an offset, yeah.
all this to say, if you compare, really, you know that the meme of like every map in the world, and it's like a global
Yeah.
map, and it's
Yeah,
like
every single map ever, and it's the heat
yeah,
map of India
yeah,
is darker, and then China is red, and then
yeah.
America and Europe are blue, right?
Right. There's always something like that. So it's either like
Yeah,
drinkable tap water, or it's like AIDS or
or
IQ.
or marrying your cousin. That was one that was going around for a
Yeah.
while. Yeah,
So all that to say, if you take all of these countries and you break them down by either IQ or however you want to measure it,
hmm,
test scores or whatever, you'll always get the same. The East Asian countries are crushing everybody, right?
yeah, hmm,
White people are tailing them, Latin American countries are tailing them, and then blacks are just
on the bottom,
getting lapped.
way behind.
Yeah,
Yeah,
way, way, way. And so, if you actually take the time to break that down within people in America, in the public education system in America,
yeah. If you break it
they
down by
fit.
those same cultures and ethnicities,
Yeah,
it's amazing how they map right over everybody else.
right. You
But
can do
according
the.
to Steve Saylor in this post, slightly better. Like,
Yeah, well,
our
it's them.
Latinos are better than their Latinos, and
Yeah,
our
it's
blacks are
them on
better than their
steroids.
blacks. Yeah.
Now, there's other
Hmm.
things. Now, some would even say that the reason for that is you have um, white admixture in there.
Hmm.
So our, and the average African American has something like a quarter white DNA. It's a very
It's
mixed
a
race.
very,
Even
very
yeah,
high number, all
yeah,
things considered. Yeah.
right. So you're talking like on average one grandparent, like one full grandparent worth
Hmm.
of white DNA. So some would say that. I know that. Oh, what's his
And you've
face?
also got to give a lot of it to the culture that America has, because even in the world of DEI that we're in right now, you still have a culture that predominantly awards good behavior. And if you're truly putting in your effort, if you're truly trying, you will be rewarded for that effort. And so the cream rises to the top, so to speak.
Yeah,
So in other
I would say
countries, that may not be the case.
it's all these different diverse groups on steroids in
Hmm.
America. All that to
Yeah.
say, Steve Saylor has proven that the public education system in America is actually pretty good.
Hmm.
In fact, if you take what he's saying at face value, it's better than average. That we somehow have a better public education system than even Europe because, like he says, like our white guys are outperforming their white guys, and they're
Hmm.
they're ostensibly the
Yeah,
standard for which excellence is reached.
yeah.
So why would
And
we?
if you want to chalk up like African Americans do better than Africans because of white admixture, then it's like, well, I mean, that's a two-way street. Surely the whites in America should be doing worse than European whites because of admixture, and yet they're right on par,
Yeah,
with the best. So
yeah,
theoretically,
yeah. I mean, that's a very deep
there's
conversation. But I bring this up. I bring this specific thing up because I want to start off on a realistic note. Right?
yeah.
If we're going to talk about how we actually do with the way that public education is currently, we have to
Hmm.
be serious about the racial distinctions, because that's the only way you're going to make sense of any of this.
Yeah, and if you're not keeping this, as distasteful as it is in our environment today, if you're not keeping this in the forefront of your mind, if you're trying to compare inner city Detroit schools with, Xinjiang province, uh, you know, upper class, these are the aristocrats' kids, that's not going to go well.
Yeah.
But if you try, if you pull some school out in California that's like, the rich kids who've got all of the good breeding and all of the good training and all of the good raising, or maybe upper New York State, and then you compare them to, Mongolia, Inner Mongolia, it's going to be like, yeah, tables have turned.
Yeah.
Growth in
This,
administrative staff. This is insane.
yes. This real nice number there at the top. Administrative administrative staff changed since 2000. So all of these numbers start in the year 2000, and they go to 2019 is the last year, and you have an 88% increase in administrative staff. Now that might sound uh, like, okay, well, there has to be someone above the teachers. But then
Hmm.
I question this. Then there's the orange number underneath it is 37%, which is much, much lower. And that number represents principals and assistant principals. So who are these administrators that are above the principals and assistant principals? Who are these people?
Yeah, yeah. Who is it that's pulling the strings here? Who's telling the boss who's boss? Right.
Yeah, I don't understand that at all. And then you've got both teachers and students have grown 8%. So there has been a growth in students, which, you could say, okay, well, that necessitates an increase in spending, right? Um, and that's fine. Interestingly enough, for those who are watching the video, you can see in this graph that teachers around, what would you say, 2003 started to outpace the growth in students, which is good. You
Hmm.
want smaller classrooms. But then in 2009, it broke even with students again. So I don't know what happened there. That
It
in
went
the
down. Yeah.
yeah, in the Obama presidency, like the first year,
Hmm.
uh, it just started to plummet until it got in line with student growth. So students growing 8%, principals and assistant principals growing 37%, and then administrative staff growing 88%.
Yeah. There's a building in Austin. If you drive through Austin, I don't remember which highway it is, but it's at a big highway intersection. I think Toll Road 45 and 183, or one of those interchanges. And there's this giant building, like 10 stories tall, huge, huge glass front, brick building, huge. Every single person who works in that building is an administrator. There are no teachers. There are no bus drivers. There are no, I mean, they must have a janitor, but it's like, that building is for the Austin City School District, and it's all administrators in this one building, zero teachers. Just
Crazy.
really, really nuts.
Yeah, so we've seen, massive growth, and we have increased spending, but this tracks with that increased spending. That it's not adding more teachers per student, it's adding principals and administrative staff. Now, I understand we need principals.
Hmm.
I get that, but it should be growing at a rate similar uh,
To
to
teachers.
teachers.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean, if you think about it, the principal, right? What is his job? It's to be the teacher's boss, right?
yeah.
So if the growth in teachers is steady, the growth in principals should be steady right along with that, because that's his role, is to be the boss of the teacher.
Well, I was having this conversation with my wife today. The idea of the principal is that you are the principal educator. You are the main educator of that school,
Hmm.
right? You are one of the teachers. You're not the specific teacher for that classroom, but you are like the general who is over his lieutenants and colonels, and you know, you go down the line. Um, you're supposed to be an educator yourself that is just now the head educator. Um, but then administrative staff, I mean, a lot of people have heard the reports on this. It's pretty ridiculous. Um, you know, you need some kind, I guess, a counselor to some extent, you know, nurses, stuff like that. But that
Hmm.
growth, again, should be growing with the rate of um,
Yeah,
the
all of these lines
students.
should be about steady, one would suppose.
Yeah.
These things should be.
Let's go to the next one here. This is a breakdown of this is a Google AI breakdown of what is said on a page from census.gov.
Hmm.
And the numbers, I double checked the numbers to make sure that this is all the same, right? So you have, is there a way to move your
Well, let me just kill
video?
my video.
There you go.
There we go. Now we can read it.
Yeah. This is a breakdown of per student spending in public elementary and secondary schools by state. Top 5 states, you got New York, District of Columbia, New Jersey, Vermont, Connecticut. Bottom 5 states, you've got Utah, Idaho, Arizona, Oklahoma, and then Mississippi. Actually, this is in a weird order because Utah is the lowest.
Yeah, so the highest they've got up on the top, highest
Yeah.
to lowest, and then for the lowest 5, they've got lowest to highest.
Yeah. I don't
So
know why I
sort
did
of
that.
first through fifth place,
Yeah.
according to achievement.
Right.
Yeah,
So
one thing you notice about this is, New York and DC are pretty well known for having the worst schools. Now, there are some other schools in Chicago and Detroit, the Great Lakes area,
yeah.
and then I believe St. Louis, because I've heard somebody do this breakdown before about per student versus how they're performing. And even though St. Louis is, not top of the pack for spending per pupil, they're actually really bad for, student performance. But then when you look at these bottom 5, Utah has the lowest. And Utah has a low population, but it has a very, shall we say, homogenous population.
Yeah. A lot of blondes.
Yeah, a lot of blondes, a lot of Mormons. And you know what Mormons means? It means whites. It means very, very white whites, whitest whites. Like they say sorry for something that you did, kind of white.
Yeah.
And
Canadians.
yeah, just about. But very low spending. But you don't hear about Utah like breaking records about having the best schools, but you don't hear horror stories either. They seem to be doing a pretty good job. On these bottom 5 lowest spending, the only state here of which I'm aware that does have huge problems in their schools is Mississippi. And really, the reason Mississippi is the lowest spending is because they're poor. Because if you've ever driven through Mississippi, man, it's rough.
And let's ask, what are the demographics of Mississippi?
What are the demographics of Mississippi?
What historically was going on in the Mississippi River Valley?
Trade. Lots and lots of trade.
Yeah.
Trade in what?
Human capital. Yeah.
Human capital and cheap cotton, from what I understand.
Yep.
And when all of that ended, it didn't displace a lot of people, much to the chagrin of people like President Lincoln.
Yeah.
But they tended to stay where they were. The South is most of the blacks in the United States still live in the postbellum South.
Yes. Especially Mississippi. The
Mm-hmm.
if you look at presidential voting by county, um, you can see the former Cotton Belt. I mean, you can
Yeah.
see it within the voting still today. You can see it there.
I saw an incredible map of Mississippi. Speaking of it, and it was how a glacier melt several billions of years ago, and of course I dispute the dating there, but a glacier melt thousands of years ago in my educated case, or educated opinion, I shall say, not to toot my own horn, but it said how this glacier melt affected voting turnout, and it was specifically about the Trump Hillary election. Mississippi breaking for Hillary in these certain counties. These certain counties that broke for Hillary broke that way because of a demographic presence of African Americans. Those African Americans were there because that was the arable land. The arable land brought farmers. The farmers brought
Yep.
slaves. The slaves were freed, and they didn't go anywhere. They stayed right where
Yeah.
they were.
Yeah. People love to bring up the what do they call it? The Great Migration.
Where a lot of freed blacks went
Yeah.
north for jobs.
And that's true.
Mhm.
I mean, it's true. Okay, like I totally understand it. I grew up somewhat close to like Oakland, for instance. It exists.
Mhm.
It's a real thing
Yeah.
that exists. But the vast majority are still in the
Well,
form.
and if you just game theory it a little bit, if you say, well, 1 in 10, people migrated, that's a huge migration. 1/10 of the population, that means 9/10 didn't.
Right.
1/10 of a
Yeah.
population moving to big cities is a huge migration to that city. But 9/10 of a population remaining where they are is also a vastly larger amount of population that did not move.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's do some quick math.
Interesting thing here, Vermont. Just wanted to touch on this. Vermont is one of the highest spending states. Vermont is the whitest state in the United States.
Yep.
The lowest crime, and also one of the highest, as far as test scores and things, most successful kids coming out of Vermont. So, I mean, when I was talking earlier about comparing like our elites with their elites, Vermont's a good example of that.
Yeah.
Even though the people who say the more you spend, the worse the students get, it's like, well, no, because there's Vermont. People that say, oh, well, Democratic mayors just lead to high crime. It's like, well, there's Vermont. It's always the thorn in the side of the people who don't want to address, racial consciousness head on. It's like, well, guys, all of the things that you're saying are causing the problem we have them in Vermont in spades. And yet Vermont is one of the cleanest, nicest places to live. Why might that be?
I want to go over some numbers using these numbers, right?
Okay.
So let's talk about how the school voucher system works in theory.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Now, this is a sterile, perfect, I wrote this out as king and I implemented it type of school voucher system, right? There is an amount each American citizen student qualifies for public education. That's already the case. But we can attach a dollar value similar to how we've done it here. And we can say that each student can go to the school of their choosing and turn in one of these vouchers to the public school, and the public school receives that money.
So a student in New York, when they register with a school in New York, That school then goes to the state and says, "Hey, give me $30,000 for this student."
Yes. That would be the trade. So it's essentially, you've got your golden ticket and you cannot spend it on anything else. You can't spend it yourself at all. You take the golden ticket, you turn it into the school takes it and gets their money that way. They have that receipt, they say, "Hey, we are the ones educating this child," and then the government pays that money,
Right,
right?
earmarked.
It's earmarked, yeah.
Hmm.
It's not box toss for education. It's actually like the government.
Yeah.
It's the government giving you this money based on you as an individual student.
Hmm.
So these are some breakdown numbers. Now, if we did something ridiculous like these top ones, the numbers get astronomical. But I'm going to use these bottom spenders, and I want to use $10,000 as an example.
Hmm.
Now, for those not looking at the numbers directly like we are, only Utah and Idaho are less than $10,000 per student,
Yeah.
and even then, it's within $500 each.
Yeah,
Right.
both of
So
them are. Even Utah at the lowest is 9,500 plus.
yeah, right. So I'm going to use 10,000 just as a consistent number that I can put out there. Um, Now, notably, I do want to say this. Uh, the way that these numbers break down is both state level and federal.
Yeah.
So, and so the numbers do get kind of tricky. Like, for instance, in Texas, I believe the state gives between $6,000 and $7,000 per student, and then there's whatever the federal amount is that is given, and then it adds up to about 17,000 per student in Texas. So more or less middle of the pack, um, in Texas. Uh, Probably below the middle. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. What we have is what we spend per student. I'm going to go with 10,000, right? So I don't know, what was your experience with public education growing up? You said you did high school.
No, I was homeschooled all the way through, but
Okay.
I grew up overseas.
Hmm.
So I did not know another homeschooler until we moved to the United States when I was 11 years old, and
Okay.
we started making contact with homeschoolers. So I wasn't really familiar with the homeschool community, so to
Okay.
speak,
Okay.
until I was 12 years old, getting into high school, that kind of thing.
Okay. But you were homeschooled when you were overseas.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Went I was homeschooled, but we went to a German speaking church. It was a very odd cultural situation.
Okay. Um, so I did public school, kindergarten through 12th grade, the whole way through public school. Um,
Hmm.
One thing that you will uh, notice, I don't know how this was before I was in school, um, but so I would have started kindergarten in 1994. That's how old I am. Yeah, 94 sounds right. So
Okay, the
September of
year I
9
was born.
yeah, September of 94 I would have been in kindergarten. And then I graduated in 2007
Hmm.
from high school. Um, During that time, and I am told that this is still true, the sweet spot for students per classroom was 30. 30
Hmm.
was considered, if you go over that, you're messing up.
Hmm.
And if you're under that, you're crushing it for whatever reason. 30 just happened to be that number. And it seems to still continue to be that number, one teacher for a 30 student classroom.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, across the board. So, like in elementary school, you only have the one teacher you're with all day from, like, I don't know, 8 o'clock to 2 or 3 in the afternoon. Um, and then from like middle school and high school, you kind of rotate, but it's still about 30 kids per classroom.
Hmm.
And so I'm going to use that as an example. So let's say that each student gets $10,000, or excuse me, uh, a school gets $10,000 per
Per
student,
student.
right?
Yeah.
And there's 30 students. So we're looking at $300,000 for one classroom
Per teacher.
per
Yeah.
teacher. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this is without administrators or whatever. The situation at that point would mean if you were in a perfect situation, you're like a homeschooler who has their own classroom or whatever. You're taking in, it's like I don't know. Did Little House on the Prairie do this where it was just like the one room school
Oh yeah.
on a hill? I never
There
watched that,
were.
but
Well, I never watched the TV show, but I read all the
oh,
books multiple
okay,
times. I was a independent fundamentalist Baptist homeschooler. I read Little
nice.
House on the Prairie, every single book multiple times growing up. So
Okay,
they talked about the schools several times. The best covering of it was actually in the one about Farmer Boy. Alonzo, the husband that she marries when she gets older, and he goes into his school days quite a bit more than the girls do. They were semi sort of kind of homeschooled ish
you're
up
getting
until
you're
they
getting you're getting off topic. I was just trying
yeah.
to get an idea of
But
it, if that's a
but
cultural
yeah,
thing people understand.
it was like 20 students from what I remember, something like that.
Okay, so let's
But he
say a
was not
perfect.
super frontier like she was.
So we're saying it's just one teacher in a single classroom building with 30
Mm-hmm.
students. That's the
Yeah,
situation, right? $300,000
that's a
per
lot of dough.
year. That is a lot of money,
That's a lot
right?
of money.
And so that same scenario with just 10 students, you're looking at $100,000.
Yeah.
One classroom, one teacher, only 10 students, $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
So if, like I said, in a perfect world, you're talking about a teacher taking home $100,000 a
Mm-hmm.
year.
I mean, you have to calculate in materials and the
Sure.
cost of the building and
Yeah.
things, but it's
And I'm
like
going to get to that. Yeah.
there's no way that cost is more than half of the money per student.
Right.
Um,
So
and
that so we're we have
$150,000 is still a ton of take home pay.
yes. So let's look at the 30 student one. We'll say it's a whole high school, right?
Okay.
We're still looking at 300,000 per classroom. Okay. Actually, you know what? Let's start with elementary school. So let's say that there's only one class per K through 12, right? It's the world's smallest elementary school.
Okay.
Actually, I say that because I grew up in California. I don't know if schools go that low. I've heard of people having a graduating class of like less than 100. I've heard that exists. I don't know. Anyways, let's say in this, you can put your camera back on, by the way.
All right.
You know what? In fact, I don't know. Yeah, we'll just leave that up. So we're going to look at, let's see, they're getting 300,000. Let's do some math because I went to the public education system.
Yeah, that was one thing I always thought was funny is my mom told me, you're going to learn to do math without a calculator because when you can't carry a calculator in your pocket. And now that I'm an adult, what do I carry in my pocket? But not only a calculator, but an encyclopedia and a dictionary.
Everything, yeah.
And a
the sum of human knowledge. Yeah. So we're looking at 13 classrooms within one elementary school.
Okay.
Right. Each class has 30 kids.
All right.
Each kid gets $10,000 in a voucher. So you're looking at the third, in this hypothetical state, the third lowest spending per student. Right. You're looking at, for all those classrooms, so K through 12 is 13 classes, $3.9 million.
Million. Yeah.
Practically
$4 million.
Yes. So with that money, you're looking at paying, let's see, if you're paying 13 actual teachers, do you think you got enough money for that? What would that even, like, minus the
Janitorial
130,000 so
staff,
that they all get, well, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, let's go
yeah.
with I'm trying to think. I mean, the numbers become astronomical when you really break them down.
Yeah. I mean, this really puts into perspective why every 2 years or so our schools come to us with these insane spending plans. They're like, "Hey, you're all going to vote on
Yeah.
us, doing this new building for multiple millions of dollars," and you just pull your hair out. You're like, "What? Do you think this money just grows
Yeah.
on trees?" But
So
when you
let's
realize that's
spend
a budget they're actually dealing with every year, they're used to
yeah.
spending this money.
Let's spend some money, right?
Mm-hmm.
How much do we want to pay each teacher? Now, with this money, we're going to ask the teachers to supply their own
Materials.
whatever
Oh
materials,
yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's go ahead and let's say that these 13 teachers are going to be paid $200,000 a year, and $100,000 of that is expected to go into materials for 30 students, right? So we'll
That'd
say
be that'd be pretty nice. I mean, that's a
two,
lot of materials you can buy
two.
for that much.
Yeah, you could buy them each.
A really nice computer.
Yeah, like a desktop computer,
Mm-hmm.
that, like a gaming computer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
And have money to burn on the other side of it.
yeah. So we're looking at 13 teachers times 200,000. Well, we've spent $2.6 million,
Already.
right? Already.
Mm-hmm.
So not a small amount of money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now we're looking at $1.3 million for everything else that this elementary school needs. $1.3 million. And you're paying each
Per year.
teacher per
Mm-hmm.
year. Yes, correct.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What are we doing with $1.3 million? What do we want to spend it on?
Mm-hmm.
Now we could bank it, and then 10 years from now make the most ridiculous gym complex, and you know what I mean?
Giant
Like,
football field.
yes,
Yeah.
what are we spending all of this extra money on is the question. With
Mm-hmm.
$1.3 million, we're looking at I mean, if we're to say staff, right? Each staff member gets paid $100,000 a year. We're looking at, oh boy, I should know the math on that. We have
And this whole time we're working with the bottom 5 states. We're calculating from the poorest states
there you
to the most money savvy states. In Utah and Idaho. It's like
go.
New York is spending 30,000. So multiply it by 3. I mean, this 1.6 million. Somebody might be like, well, yeah. I mean, but property values around here, you're not going to be able to have a nice school for that much. It's like, yeah, but in New York, multiply that by 3.
Yeah. You
Bump
could
it up.
also hire, okay, so here's the math. I should have known this. You could hire another 13 staff members at $100,000 a year with that extra $1.3 million.
Man, I'm in the wrong racket.
I know.
I should be a school administrator.
Yeah. So, I mean, these are just example numbers, right? Using the smallest spending and all that. So what the school voucher system does, now that we know what the spending would actually look like if you did that, what it actually does is it would allow the parents to choose which school they go to. So if you're at a school that is, embezzling the money and they're not pumping it back into the students, you can go to some other school. So you have the best of both worlds. You have the competition aspect of capitalism, but you have you don't pay out of your own pocket. It comes out of the tax dollars of socialism. So you have it's the best of both worlds with the school voucher system. Now, I'm going to address real quick because I brought this up at the beginning of the episode that the kind of people who object to this, one of the categories is people who already homeschool.
Mm-hmm.
And if you already homeschool, first of all, you are not part of the system that
Yeah,
we're talking about reforming. We're talking about reforming the public school system.
but you're still funding it.
You are still funding it.
Yeah.
Correct. So on
So
that
that.
so on that note, nothing has changed on your end.
Mm-hmm.
It's gotten better for people like me who are in the public school system or people
Mm-hmm.
who grew up in it, right? We have it better. Now, if you're homeschooled, yeah, I get it. Nothing changes for you, but that's the other. Now, here's another idealistic thing. Now that I've established that worst case scenario, nothing changes for you if you homeschool, and I would say like this. Like, again, you're not part of the system we're trying to reform. You are on your own separate quest. More power to you. God bless your endeavors. But that's not what we're talking about reforming.
Mm-hmm.
You're already perfect in what you're doing as a homeschool teacher and parent, right? Where you're at is fine. Here's the idealistic thing that would make it better. If you could just take that $10,000 check and as a homeschooler just use it yourself
Mm-hmm.
for
And it would have to be earmarked, but
yeah.
we
But
already
let's
have earmarked spending. I mean, WIC, Women, Infants, and Children,
yeah.
is an earmarked program. You go into a store and you look at milk, and it's like, there's 10 brands of milk at the grocery store, but two of them have a little WIC tab next to
Right.
the price tag where it says, yeah, these are WIC approved. You
Right.
could have the exact same thing. You walk through Staples, you walk through Walmart, and you
Yeah.
have just your little price tag thing with a marker right next to it says, this is approved. Yeah, you can swipe your card and you can spend up to $10,000 on really nice ballpoint pens or
Yeah.
paper projects or science fair stuff. It's like, man, that would be a huge boon.
Yeah. And so at some point, how many kids do you have, Jeff? I always forget.
So I have 4 and 1 on the way, but only
Okay.
2 of them are school age. So in that case, it'd be like I'd be getting $20,000, which is
Yeah.
like half, practically a third to half of my income,
Right.
which I would be getting on top,
Right.
going
And that's
just toward my kids.
right. And
Hmm.
that's what I'm saying. That a thing like this would encourage women to stay home,
Hmm.
educate their children, and they would be making a significant amount of money doing it.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, if my wife, by staying home, were making that kind of money, it would take
oh,
a huge load off of my mind.
dude, yeah, it would be huge. And it's money
Hmm.
that you're already spending. Whatever
Yeah.
money it is that you're spending to homeschool kids, it's already coming out of your pocket. So
Yep.
this would be money that you would be not spending out of your own pocket. It would just be,
Hmm.
your golden ticket for an education.
Yeah,
Uh,
so I want to raise one objection and kind of
sure,
throw a wrench in the gears real quick,
let's
but
do
I'm
it.
going to I'm going to tug it right out at the end. Okay,
Okay.
I'm going to say something and then I'm going to contradict myself right away.
Hmm.
Okay, but the only reason that you can spend so much on these children is because private schooled and homeschooled children are still paying taxes toward these numbers. And if all of a
Hmm.
sudden they're part of the take, they're not just giving with no benefit from the system, that's going to drive your numbers down. Now I'm going to pull that wrench right back out and say, actually, the majority of kids go to public school. I don't
Yeah.
think that that's actually a realistic number. I think probably it's negligible.
Yeah, and I think that this conversation gets to the difference between a what is sometimes called conservative and what is actually conservatism
Hmm.
historically. I would say that the main thing that matters within a true historic conservatism is taking care of your people. That would be me. I would say that the people uh, come first. Now, there's all. there's always going to be debate about how that works, but um, public education is part of that. So that the poorest of your community or your nation or whatever can still get some kind of education if they're in, I know a lot of people love to um, just bag on parents who send their kids to public school. I understand why they would say that, but for some people, they have to have both parents working in order
Yeah.
to just scrape by. We have situations like that. Not everyone can go out and crush it, or start a business, or I joined the military and that's how I take care of my kids. Well, not everyone can join the military,
Well,
and
and the people who join the military are, for the most part, not home. And it's like, if you're
yeah,
not home, who's educating the kids?
yeah. So I mean, there are reasons that the vast majority of people are, at least in today's America, are going to be sending their kids to public school. And we should be seeking, since that is where the majority of children are going to be schooled, we should be seeking to make it as good as possible. We shouldn't just cede that ground and say, no, I'm going to, I understand pulling your kids out of public school so that they don't, they can avoid the travesties that we hear coming out. But at the same time, we should also be seeking to make those systems as good as possible
Hmm.
and to conquer those systems for Christ so that other people's kids can also benefit in that same way. Um, so the spending thing, right? The first thing it's going to do is going to get rid of all those administrative positions that don't mean anything. Um, you're not going to be able to hire a director of diversity at
Hmm.
your elementary school or
Or
whatever.
a manager of directors and a
Yeah,
director of
yeah,
managing
yeah,
directors.
yeah. It's like a lot of those positions. It reminds me of in there's an episode in How I Met Your Mother where Barney is talking about his, like, he's got a guy that does this and he's got a guy for this and whatever, and then he's got a guy who gets him guys, like so that's how a lot of these
Hmm.
titles
Yeah.
uh that's what they sound like, where it's like the director of administrators. Like, well, how high does this pyramid scheme go up
Yeah.
is the question. um Another thing that school vouchers could do is, at my local Lutheran church, we used to have a private school. Now, this is long before I joined this church,
Hmm.
um, but it was a Lutheran school. And with school vouchers, we could start that up again for the
Yeah.
reason that I already brought up. If we just have, let's say some stay at home mom has some kids, and them plus a couple other people's kids or whatever gets to a 10 student classroom, right? You're now looking at $100,000 going into that classroom for whatever it is. So let's say she now takes home uh let's say 50,000, right? That's not chump change, at least here in
No.
Texas. um I mean, that would honestly be a pretty good year for me if, if
Hmm.
I made
Yeah.
50,000. But let's say she makes 50,000, and then
More than I
50,000,
made last year.
yeah, and then fifty
Yeah.
thousand goes into whatever general fund of workbooks, or building up the library, or whatever goes into computers. And so, I mean, very, very quickly, you would be building up, the school library. You'd be having like a computer lab. You would have all this stuff within a couple of years. You'd have so much money coming in to that system, and still being able to pay essentially a stay-at-home mom, because it's her kids in the school as well. You've got this kind of co-op situation through the church, so that it's whatever denomination you want. For us, it would be a Lutheran school. um, you could just have members of the church be in there, and they're making money, and it's a perfect situation if there's no strings attached. Now, again, this is all idealized, but it goes to show how much better things could be with just the school voucher, just that one change. You wouldn't even have to demand a curriculum change. Those things would happen naturally. You could easily take your kid out of whatever crud school that they're in and
Yeah,
put them
some
into a
inner
new one.
hellhole that's just falling apart. Put them
Yeah,
into your religious school of choice.
yeah,
Lutheran, Catholic, what have you.
yeah.
That's an interesting thing about the United States public school system. When public schools were mainlined, I believe this was in the 1960s, but it may have been before that, like 1930s or something like that. But there was a huge movement of anti-public school from the Catholics and the Lutherans. And they said these schools are designed to undercut our religious institutions.
Hmm.
And the people who were making the changes, who were instituting the public school, said, yes, yeah, that's what we're
Yeah,
doing. We are here to remove your religious institutions. We don't like Catholic schools. We don't like Lutheran schools. These were predominantly, East, Yankees. These were, Easterners, New Englanders who are like, we don't want a religious institution teaching Americans how to be an American. We want these to be filled by the state. Um, a very a very fascist program, if you know what I mean. It's
hmm.
state funded, state run for the purpose of raising good citizens, as opposed to a religious institution which is trying to instill religious virtue into the citizenry. So that's why when these things first came out, the Lutheran Church was excommunicating people for sending their children to public school. And they were working very hard to make their private schools affordable for their laity, because they saw this as a change from religion to state run, and they were opposed to it on those grounds.
Yeah, I think let's say for the person like myself, I'm not going to speak for you. I mean, I would imagine you would rather homeschool than have like a co-op or something like I'm saying. I mean, you can
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
you'd rather just homeschool.
my wife and I are pretty well educated,
Okay.
but we're well educated, highly intelligent, and so we would much rather school our own children. But I
Sure.
do realize that that isn't for everybody. If
Yeah.
you've got a low IQ couple, and they exist, and no, I'm not making fun of people. These are real people in a real situation in life that have real problems they're trying to solve. And one of those problems is, how do I educate my children when I know that I am not qualified and not capable of doing so? That's a real
Yeah.
problem real people have to face.
Yeah, and that's why uh, I personally would rather have like a private Christian school, like through my church. I would rather have that. Um, I understand why people don't want that, but that would be my preference.
Yeah.
And the
Well, I mean,
other,
we're both Christian nationalists, so we're very,
sure,
we're not as opposed to the anti-religious kind of sentiment that a lot of people have. We need to live in a society that is
yeah,
culturally, just every religion is equal, every denomination is equal. It's like, no, I have a denomination, I have a preference, and I actually prefer them. I think I'm right, so I
well,
want my people to succeed.
let's also
Mhm.
talk about the evangelism aspect of this. So, my church is more or less in my neighborhood.
Mhm.
Um, and let's say I want to reach the kids in this neighborhood that I live in. One way to do that, if this school voucher system existed, is, hey kids, you can come to our Lutheran school. We will accept your uh
Yeah, we'll gladly accept your bunny.
yeah, we'll take your $10,000 and then we'll put you in our classrooms and you
Mhm.
can learn along with our kids and stuff. But because we are a Lutheran church and we are a Lutheran school, you will be learning the Lutheran religion, essentially.
Mhm.
You will be learning these things. Now, there's other things you can do because there are ways that are still legal to say like you have to be a member at this church in order to go to this school.
Yeah.
There's still ways to do that. Um, some of the right of association still exists in this country. Um, the entire Bill of Rights hasn't been eroded. There's
Well,
still
not quite.
scraps. There's still scraps that we have, and that's one of them. So that would be the other aspect of it, is that whatever you want your school to be, is Baptist or God forbid Methodist or something like that. You could do that. You could establish that school, and you can get all the kids to be your denomination. I can tell you that joke really resonated with you.
Well, wait a minute. I mean, if this is going to create a bunch of Wesleyan schools, maybe we shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
On second thought,
abort.
abort.
So that's my rant. I don't really have much more to say on that, unless you had questions about, because I've thought a lot about this.
The thing is, this is, administrative bloat is something that's so common in so many. That chart that you brought up about, the administration, it reminded me of this right here. So my dad's a doctor. My wife's a doctor, and he, one of the things that people have pointed out is, the cost of healthcare is just insane. Yeah. And so patients would come to my dad, and they'd get a prescription for something, and they'd get one hospital visit or one clinical visit, and then they'd be like, why are y'all soaking me of my life savings? You grow old and you're getting ready to die, and you just don't want to die in a ton of pain, and you want some health care so that you can continue working and continue living with your family. And you go in to see the doctor, and he charges you an arm and a leg to fix your arm and your leg. And it's like, well, I don't see the benefit here. And he would tell them, look, guys, I'm not making a ton of money. I'm not a brain surgeon. I'm not an administrator. I'm a family practice doctor. I deliver babies, and I fix your splinters that get infected, and I freeze your warts off. And you come to me, and I tell you if you have an infection, and I give you some medicine for your infection. It's like I'm not rolling in the dough here. I'm scrimping and saving to get side hustles to make money, just like you are in your job, because it's a very middle class kind of income. And then they're like, well, how come it costs so much? And it's like, well, here you are. This is why it costs so much. I mean, that chart that you showed looks so much like this one. It's insane. Yep. Like, why do we have administrators over administrators of hospitals, over administrators of doctors, over, it's like the physicians, and some of it's understandable, right? You got to have a secretary at the desk who's like, okay, when are you going to make your appointment? Okay, you go to the dentist, you don't see the dentist right away. You see the secretary, and then the secretary brings, makes your appointment. Then you get taken to your room by a tech, and then the dentist comes in and like fills in 2 cavities, shakes your hand, and leaves, right? And so some of that's understandable. But let's say you've got 2 dentists running a dental office with 4 nurses and 3 secretaries. It's like, that's not what you're seeing here. All right, this is, a 3,000% surplus of administration. You've got 3,000% more administrators than you have physicians. That's insane.
Yeah.
I mean, what?
A lot of it is, it's essentially rent-seeking behavior. It's trying to get in between a doctor and their patient. So the doctor should be the one getting the money, but someone else is like, wait a second, how can I get myself involved in this whole thing? Yeah. I know, I'll be the guy that sets you up with the doctor, or I'll be the I don't know.
Or I'll be the lawyer that makes sure that he's not going to get sued, and I'll be the lawyer who's going to sue him. It's like, I think a lot of this comes, I don't know in the school system, but I think a lot of this in the medical system comes from the litigious nature of our society, where everybody's so quick to sue everybody that you just have no common sense, and you lose the human touch in a lot of this. I don't know
Would
how to
you?
solve all the world's problems, but I think firing 90% of these administrators would probably go a long way to solving some of these problems.
Yeah, and stop firing the conservatives that
Oh
have
yeah,
opinions that you don't
that
like.
you don't like. Yeah, some uh, some doctor who's like, I think the vaccines might not be as good as some people are saying. It's like,
Yeah.
nope, out you go. It's
Yep.
well,
Go
maybe
starve on the
that's part
street.
of your problem. Yep. All
Yeah,
right.
it's
Well, we've
awful.
been going for an hour, so I'm going to roll into mine. I'm going to
Yep.
try and make it quick, but um, I don't have a lot to say on this. I could talk about this for hours, but I think it can be summed up in a short amount of time, which is, in the video description and the blurbs that I sent, I said, what is an American? And this is a conversation that you and I have talked about before, just in
Hmm.
passing, not directly, but like when we talked about monarchy with
Hmm.
Samuel Johnson, one thing that you pointed out at the time and later is like, if we switch to a monarchy, America would not cease to be America,
Yes.
because America is not an idea. America is a people,
Hmm.
and America is a people and a place. It's, so to speak, blood and soil. So, um, what did our founders think America was when they founded our nation? Well, here is the preamble of the Constitution of the United States. Just a few sentences. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America. Now, they saw themselves as a people with posterity, with limitations. We're not just everybody. Like in The Incredibles, which I've brought up several times. When everybody's super, nobody is. Or these people who are like, well, everybody's an American. They just haven't got here yet.
Yeah.
As soon as their feet come off the airplane or the boat and they touch the magic soil, they become an American. It's like that's not actually how it works.
Yeah.
It actually means something to be an American. And what was it that these
Can
people meant?
can I just real quick talk about the phrase magic soil?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think some people haven't heard this, and I remember the first time somebody explained what that means. Like, I was just like, dude, that's brilliant. And so, because what they're essentially saying is that by taking somebody from the third world or wherever they're coming from, and you put them on American soil, that suddenly out of nowhere they they have been this perfect replaceable economic unit that acts like an American and has no previous
Yep.
history.
Thinks like
And
an American, doesn't,
yeah,
fondle women on the subway, returns
right.
his shopping cart,
Yeah.
doesn't park in a no parking zone,
Test
doesn't
scores
litter.
test
Yeah.
scores are the same.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. It's like,
it's a whole there's so many things about that magic soil idea. And what's funny is when you try to press someone because they're like, oh, you're just simplifying it, that's a silly thing to say. Okay, well, you explain it. And when they try to explain it, it always comes down to magic soil. They're an
mhm.
American because they touch the magic soil. And
They're an American because they got here.
right.
That
Yeah, they
that
made it.
really sums it up.
Yeah.
You had, the fortitude to get on an airplane, which is not hard to do,
No.
and to sit for 8 to 16 hours on an airplane till you got here and you got off, and now you're an American.
Yep.
Like, well, if that's the standard, that's a pretty low standard. But I found this writing from a guy, Michel Guillaume Jean de Révocoeur. Um, very interesting guy. He was an early American. He was a Frenchman who fought in the French and Indian War on the French side, mind you. Liked it so much that when he got back to France after France lost that war, he moved to the United States, and then he became an American. So this is from the perspective of somebody who's not a founding father, but is an early American, but is also an immigrant, and moved here because he wanted to assimilate into what already existed. And I thought this perspective was interesting. He says, one of the things he liked about it was that America was not a monarchy, was not an aristocracy, uh, so to speak. take issue
Mm,
with that. He
mm.
says, here are no aristocratical families, no courts, kings, or bishops, no ecclesiastical dominion, meaning, the the church denomination did not rule the entire thing. This is a Frenchman, so Catholic specifically. No great manufacturers employing thousands, no great refinements of luxury. The rich and poor are not so far removed from each other as they are in Europe. Now, we certainly are that way today. I mean, that certainly has changed. But I thought it was very interesting. The thing he loved about America is the agrarian lifestyle. He moved here um, for kind of Thomas Jefferson's ideal. He loved the fact that they're a bunch of farmers. But, after this spiel about, um, we're not a, we're a democracy or we're a republic, however you might say. But then he has this later section where he says, the next wish of a traveler will be to know whence came all these people. They are a mixture of English, Scotch, Irish, French, Dutch, Germans, and Swedes. From this promiscuous breed, that race now called Americans have arisen. So even a guy that moderns would perhaps put up as their champion, like, look, this guy says what defines us is our ideals, what defines us is our ideas. Even he's using the language of, yeah, we're a race of people. Yeah, we have a diaspora, as it were, admixture that has created us, but it has created us into an ethnicity. It has created
I'm
us into a specific people.
I'm surprised. So this was 1782. Am I understanding that?
Very early on, the book was written, I believe, in the 1770s, so it would have been released after the
Oh wow.
separation.
I
But he moved to the Americas before uh,
okay.
the separation. So
See,
from what I read, he didn't fight in the Revolutionary War, but he was there for it.
okay. It's
Mm.
just it's interesting to me that Germans and Swedes are mentioned in that because I
Yeah,
always thought of German and Swedish.
as a
German,
little bit later. Yeah.
yes, because I mean George Washington famously used Germans as an example of a people that it we would have to let in a very small amount at a time so that they would become Americans and
Hmm.
not. I mean, even with the amount of Germans we brought, we still ended up with like German newspapers in the United States.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, but so that's interesting to me that and especially Swedes because um, I always think of at least 1850s ish for
Yeah. Well, I mean, these
Swedish
would all have
immigration.
been the minority
Yeah.
of all of these people, except for English, Scotch, Irish, which Scotch and Irish, the Irish that were coming over that he would have seen, that's not, the Irish Catholics predominantly. These would have all been Protestants from these countries. There were a lot of French who came to the Americas because of the oppression, the religious oppression of the Protestants. There's a huge population of French that went into South Africa and the United States, which were not the United States at the time, but the New World, to flee the persecution of the French Catholic Church. And then, but anyway, the interesting thing here is, he says the eastern provinces must indeed be accepted as being the unmixed descendants of Englishmen. I have heard many wish that they had been more intermixed, melting pot. For my part, I am no wisher, and I think it much better as it happened. They exhibit a most conspicuous figure. In this great and variegated picture, they too enter for a great share in the pleasing perspective displayed in these 13 provinces. I know it is fashionable to reflect on them, but I respect them for what they have done, for the accuracy and wisdom with which they have settled their territory, for the decency of their manners, for their early love of letters, their ancient college, the first in this hemisphere, for their industry, which to me, who am but a farmer, in the criterion of everything. There never was a people situated as they are who with so ungrateful a soil have done more in so short a time. Do you think that the monarchical ingredients which are more prevalent in other governments have purged them from all foul stains? Their histories assert the contrary. So this is a man who's, per se anti-monarchical, anti, as it were, church, the Roman church ruling over this country. And yet he has this perspective of people being, free, independent Englishmen. And despite the fact that even early on you have these people that are like, oh man, we should all be a melting pot, we should all meld together, he's like, nah, these Englishmen are pretty great. This race
Yeah.
that has this race, in his own words, that has occurred is predominantly English, and I like it. So even the person, the earliest person that would be a champion of the melting pot theory, is not a proponent of the melting pot theory. He's like, nah, the
Yeah.
Englishmen are pretty great. I wish they'd be English. Me, I'm just a farmer. I'm just a Frenchy farmer, but I love these Englishmen. Look at what they've done. Look at their manners. Look at their customs. I mean, he said in this book, I loved it so much that I wanted to come here and become a part of it. He wanted to melt into them. He didn't want them to melt into him. So, anything before I move on to the next clip?
No, I mean, I think that's spot on. I will say actually, so these people that he's taught, what part of America was he in?
So he was in what would be New England today. I mean, this is the map with the red dot. I mean, this is like upper Maryland, Massachusetts kind of area.
Is this red crazy thing? Is that still Virginia?
Yeah. So this is the map in 1771. Virginia reaching all the way up to Niagara.
Yeah,
which
I know it used to be huge.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you talk to Virginians about the proper domain of Virginia, I mean, if I couldn't be a Texan, I would be a Virginian, right?
Yeah.
Because they are just so proud of their land and their heritage. Love
that's
the
so
Virginian.
that's what I was gonna bring up is that my fifth great grandfather was in the Revolutionary War.
Mm-hmm.
Directly under Washington, and he was from Virginia. And this whole idea of like, oh, we're a nation of immigrants. Well, he wasn't an immigrant. He was a colonist. He moved to a place where a country did not exist.
And he made one.
And he formed a colony, and then they declared their independence. So he founded America with his
and then
own...
he shed his blood to turn it into America.
Yeah. He founded America with his own hands among many, many other people. And he was not an immigrant. He didn't immigrate anywhere. Yeah. He physically moved to another part of the British Empire as a proper Englishman. He didn't become an American until America was founded.
Yeah,
he went through that process,
and yet he was already a part of this thing that this man has called, Julian Crèvecoeur. He called it a race.
Yeah,
he called it an ethnicity, and that's one thing that I think, people who don't have a racial consciousness, who've had that washed out of them by the American education system, the public education system. They think that you can live in a post-racial society. And I was one of them. I mean, I was homeschooled, but I wasn't homeschooled into thinking, races, are important, or even that they exist. But you see things like this in South Africa, like where the white people and the black people in South Africa mixed. A third race came out of that, which is called, in South Africa, they're called the coloreds. Yeah. And they are distinct from whites, and they are distinct from blacks. And they hold themselves out as an independent voting bloc. They are, if you want to be somebody in South Africa, you need to court the different voting blocs, the largest of which is blacks. The next of which is the coloreds, who are an Afrikaans-speaking, half white, half black people. And then the minority that everybody loves to hate, of course, is the whites, who themselves are distinct into two different ethnicities, the English and the Boer. So, it's not whether, but which. There's going to be racial distinction. And, people like that I'm going to hold my tongue, but Joel Berry from the Babylon Bee, who's like, we all need to race mix until we're all just a homogenous color of brown. It's like,
Yeah.
that's an unrealistic expectation. And even
Yeah.
if that happens, all you're going to end up with is a separate race of people who see
Yeah.
themselves as distinct.
Yeah.
American coloreds are going to be as distinct from South African coloreds, and they're not going to be like, kumbaya, we're all coloreds, haha, let's get along.
Yeah.
They're going to be like, no, we're American coloreds, and y'all are South African coloreds.
Yeah.
Like
Let's
that post from the beginning of this, where it's like the American blacks are better than the African blacks.
Yeah.
I believe that. Our blacks are better than yours. We like them better than yours.
I've even seen online there are African Americans who will post when a crime is committed by a full-blown African living in America.
Yeah.
Who, they'll post like, look at the physiognomy. This, I don't know if they say it in that many words. They're like, he's not one of us.
Look at
his head. He's not one of us. He's this different thing. I remember being in the Army, and I had a very very black MOS, let's say. So I had many black friends in the Army. And I remember one of them one time was talking about, we're in Germany at the time. And he's talking about, I'm with this, a mulatto woman. I don't remember which word he used, but she's a mulatto. And, and I was like, oh, is her dad African? And he's like, why would you ask that? Why you just think that he's from Africa? Like, he's like this.
And he was offended.
And I was like, dude, we're in Germany. This isn't America where black people have lived here for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And there's this distinct culture. I was like, Germany doesn't have a history of black people living. Like, this dude's probably, and it was funny because he wasn't like serious upset, but it was kind of like a joking upset.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And he was like, to the point where I remember a distinct joke that he had made was he was saying, we're a totally different people. Okay. There's black people and then Africa. Like, that was like his thing. Like, you have to know the difference. And I was like, oh, okay, whatever, dude. And then like a week later, turns out her dad actually is African. Not surprised, bro. So there's already this understanding of, and that's why I think that the term African American is completely appropriate, because it's
absolutely legitimate.
It not only distinguishes American as the more foundational version of like a heritage American, but it also distinguishes from Africa. You're saying that you are an American who has descendants that grew up through the slavery process and then everything after that.
Yeah,
like that.
It's a
your
part
people
of your
group.
history. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, you can't be sold into slavery on a new continent, and then 200 years later, your descendants are like, man, I'm going to move back to Nigeria, or I'm going to move back to sub-Saharan Africa, and we're going to re-assimilate into the African culture. This is something that we saw with well, I won't name any names, but several prominent people who are black have done that, where they've gone back to Africa, and the Africans in Africa don't appreciate it.
Yeah,
they see them and they're like, "You're an American. You're not our people." And the other thing you see when you get to Africa is the Africans are extremely racist against each other. Like, there's not just one black African diaspora.
Yeah,
you go to Congo and they're all murdering each other. You go to this tiny for African country called Rwanda, right? And you've got the Hutu and the Tutsi, and they're genociding each other. These people who are very closely related to each other have lived in the same area. And as soon as the Europeans who are keeping them from genociding each other leave, what happens but immediately a genocide that captivated the entire world's view for a while because of just how savage it was. It really put it really put an end to a lot of the ideas that the UN is going to bring world peace. There's a very famous movie, Shooting Dogs, about the Rwandan genocide. And it was made by this guy who's just completely disillusioned by the UN and its mission, because he went there and here are these white Europeans, they're armed, they go in and they're not allowed to stop the genocide. They're only allowed to shoot the dogs who are eating the dead bodies. And that's where the name Shooting Dogs came from. It's like, man, it's a brutal reality in Africa, and you can't just leave America and be like, no, I'm an African now. I'm an African. I'm going to go back to my homeland. I have a lot of sympathy for African Americans because they can't. I mean, it would be like me trying to go back to Germany and being like, dude, I'm a German.
Yeah, it's not the same.
It's not the same. And for them, even more so, because it's been hundreds of years. For me, it's only been 60 years, right? For them, it's been hundreds of years.
There was a story that I'd seen in, I don't know, something. I think it was like 4chan years and years ago the last time I went on 4chan. But it was this guy who had Norwegian heritage like myself. And he went back to Norway and he was like, yeah, man, I'm Norwegian. And to a man, they all responded, no, you're not. You're an American. Yeah. Like, no, you're not one of us. I don't care what your bloodline says. Like, that's not the same. So there is a distinction. The other thing is, I wish I would have saw that Joel Berry post, because I would have advocated that maybe the Palestinians and the Israelis just all need to race mix.
Oh, and that was one of the very first comments.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what about Israel? And he's like, no, they're the chosen people. They don't have to do that. No. Not my people, not them. And that was one of the. I don't have it on this computer, but I have it on my phone. But that was one of the videos that early red pilled me. Was this video from? What is that Canadian atheist bald guy? Shoot, I can't remember his name anymore, but very prominent on race relations. And he had a caller who called in and he was like, we should have open borders. He's like, okay, what about Israel? I was like, no, you can't do that. He's like, dude, all these things that you're saying are so good for America. Why can't they be for Israel? So anyway, getting back to the subject, because we're running out of time. Here is, what is an American? We've seen, what the founders wrote in the Constitution, and we've seen what Guerre said about, the Americans of his time. But what about, what about, let's say, an American such as a congresswoman from New York? Boy. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I'm only going to play maybe the first minute and a half of this, but what does she say an American is? This is in her response to Elon Musk. My heart goes out to you that he did.
This is the United States of America. And I don't care what Elon Musk is doing behind a presidential seal. In this country, we hate Nazis. Kind of like a foundational defining thing. Two of probably the most foundational defining things about American history is that we beat the Confederates and we beat the Nazis. And I don't know what side people may be on today, but I still am not rocking with anyone sympathetic to Nazis. And I will do that until I am 6 feet in the ground.
So the defining characteristic, according to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, representative of the New Yorkers, is the defining characteristics, at least some of, she did say some of, some of the defining characteristics of who Americans are is they defeated the Nazis and they defeated the Confederacy. And here's the thing. Ultimately, and it pains me to say this, I don't think she's wrong. In the post-war consensus, what makes an American? What makes you an American is that you hate Nazis and you hate the Confederacy. And a lot of people are going to get rubbed the wrong way, and they're going to be like, well, the Confederacy and the Nazis were two different things. It's like, well, when you look at it from the post-war consensus perspective, what is the job of America? Our job is to go around the world instituting democracy. We are supposed to be fighting oppression. We defeated the Nazis in Germany. We destroyed fascism in Europe. We tortured Mussolini to death, despite the fact that Mussolini was one of the most honorable world leaders at the time. FDR was an absolute cad. Churchill was an insane warmonger. And, Stalin, one of the worst men to ever live. So to see what they did to him in the name of freeing the people and bringing democracy to Europe, that's a defining aspect of the post-war consensus modern America. We defeated fascism. We killed the Nazis. And then, we defeated the Confederacy. We freed the slaves. That is what is taught in our schools. That is how our children will be taught to define themselves, is that what defines us as Americans is that we fight oppression. We killed the Nazis. We killed the Confederacy. So before I go to the next clip, any comments on that?
Yeah, just a visceral reaction. I remember when this came out, because the first thing I thought was, who is we? You got to turn.
Yeah.
Like which descendant of your? Because clearly it wasn't us. Like, I'm not old enough to have fought in World War II, and I'm not old enough to have fought in the American Civil War. Like, obviously, right? So what descendant of yours? Because I can tell you which descendants of mine.
Yeah, I can tell you what my ancestors were doing during the Civil War.
Yeah.
And they weren't fighting against the Confederacy.
Yeah.
And I can tell you what my great-grandfathers were doing during World War II. And I had two that fought in World War II, and they were on opposite sides, and they were both German.
Yeah, and so my my tweet, or however, whatever platform it was on, I had said that one of the defining things about America is that we beat the Mexicans.
Yeah, in the Mexican-American War.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the guys that did that were those same generals that fought for the Confederacy.
Yeah.
Some of them were for the North, of course. But yeah,
find people on both sides.
Yes.
Those same soldiers that crossed that border and went into Mexico City and just shut it down.
Yeah.
Said, you declare war on the United States, we're going to take this all the way to your capital city, and we're going to kick your tail twice.
Yeah.
You
know, one of the great heroes of that of taking Mexico City was Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy.
Yep.
Like, people just don't have perspective on that. And the other crazy thing is, they'll say, when we fly this flag that, I've got back here kind of hidden, but you've got yours going. Yeah, it's hard to point to where you're at. We all see it. Yeah. We'll say, oh, you fly that flag like they're, those guys tried to kill Americans. Well, you're flying the Mexican flag. What does that mean? What does that mean to you? What does that mean to you in Texas? In Texas, you're flying that flag where we're both at. This, they'll say, like, oh, you want to celebrate the losers. We live in Texas, where our whole, the whole Remember the Alamo thing was about essentially a battle that Texas actually lost. And they would look back at that and say, these Mexicans are savages. Remember what they did to us when we lost. There is no surrender. Remember the Alamo. And they will kill you.
At the Alamo, the thing that they were saying was, remember Goliad. Because at Goliad, the people surrendered and were massacred.
Yeah.
And so they were like, well, we're obviously not going to surrender, because they'll just kill us all.
Yeah.
And so that's what they did, is they fought to the last man. And they all died, but at least they took 5,000 Mexican soldiers with, or however
Yeah.
many thousand it was with them. I believe the
Yeah. I
entire
mean,
force was 5,000, and they lost like 3,000 if I remember the numbers right.
yeah.
It's been a while since I went through Texas history in high school, but
That's see, and
that was a defining moment of Texas. It was the defining moment
yeah.
of Texas. Texas became a country because we fought off the Mexicans,
Yep.
and Texas became a state because the United States fought off the Mexicans again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just another another thing that I've seen online is this explanation of what is going on with millennials. You still fall under millennial, right? You'd be like one of the
Yeah,
younger millennials. I'm like kind of a middle millennial.
Yeah, I'm a younger millennial, but I'm still comfortably in the pack.
Yeah. Our generation was supposed to be the first generation to defeat racism.
Yeah.
Right. You've probably heard that before. I mean, that's how we grew up. I remember
we were the first post-racial generation. White kids listening to hip hop and rap at the skater rink. And I remember the skate parks. There was no racial segregation.
Yeah.
There were no white only water fountains. We won. We defeated the racism. And well, where are we today? What good did did it do us?
Yeah, and that's what this was it was saying like all throughout elementary school. I mean, this is my public school experience. I remember Black History Month like being a thing in elementary school, and they would have like the poster on the wall, and it would be like George Washington Carver invented peanut butter, which isn't even true, but or like Bill Cosby was a comedian. You should adore this guy. Like, oops, like
a good example of a clean, or what was it? What was it Biden said about Obama that he was? I don't remember what he said, but it was something about him being a clean and well spoken, clean and well spoken African American.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look at his teeth. These are some prime teeth in here. Yeah.
Look at how wide his nose is.
Yeah. But there was that, right? So we did our thing. We accomplished the no racism thing. And then we got punched in the mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Just a cheap shot out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Yes.
Gut punch.
And so that's the shaken baby syndrome that we have as a generation, where it's like, we're going this way, we're going that way, we're going this way, we're going that way. Mm-hmm. And we a lot of us were just like, okay, well, I guess we're not going to be the anti-racism march on Washington.
And then Katrina happens, and there's this huge race murder, or when I was a kid, out in California, you had the race riots where black people were pulling white guys out of their trucks and murdering them in the street because he was white and had the audacity to drive a truck on the highway where trucks belong.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean that Rodney King was an eye-opening moment for a lot of people, and all of this didn't last. It was nice while it lasted, but it didn't seem to last.
Yeah.
But anyway, getting back to our topic of what is an American, there was a very interesting tete-a-tete between two people. Sam Setter, who is some Hollywood actor. He's Jewish. He's a very interesting person. But I'm gonna screen share this real quick, and I'm gonna play it all the way through because I think what is said here, it's about I want to say it's about 8 minutes long. So bear with me. Or maybe it's only 4 minutes long, but we'll play this entire interaction between Sam Setter and this young lady that he's debating. And he's doing this thing where he surrounds himself with supposedly conservative people, and some of them are not very conservative at all. One of them, a woman, stands up, and she actually does sound very conservative from what she's saying, very unlike a lot of people in the room. But she's very eloquently bringing forth her perspective. So anyway, his proposition is, unless you're a billionaire, a religious fundamentalist, or a xenophobic nationalist, voting for Trump was a mistake. So first off, I am not a billionaire, but I am a religious fundamentalist, And depending on how you want to define your terms, I absolutely am a xenophobic nationalist because I am a nationalist and I am suspicious of foreigners who want to come and change my country from being what it is into the third world where they came from. So anyway, this is her response to his statement.
Then you should. If
Oh,
you need
no.
to, you should.
Hang on. Let me skip forward to. Oh, let me just do this.
I don't believe you.
There we go.
Okay.
Sam.
So I actually think that this liberal world order needs to be thrown away completely, and I think Christian nationalism would be a good alternative. What we're seeing right now is
And
just
congratulations.
and thank you. And yeah, I think
Yeah.
what we're seeing now is a culture of death. This is the most suicidal generation ever. We have millions of children dying by abortion. People aren't even reproducing. We don't even have like a.
Should we mandate people reproduce?
No, I don't think we need to mandate. We can just stop them from killing their kids.
Yes. Yes, we should.
Yes.
Yes, I mean, we have a fundamental disagreement on this, and my claim was that if you voted for Trump, it would be to your benefit if you want to outlaw
I think it would
abortion.
benefit everyone.
Yeah, I disagree. I think that that women should have the right to choose.
I think that
You are muted. I'm not hearing you.
So the idea that a Jewish guy opposes limits on abortion, if you look at the people who brought about abortion in the United States, it was a very Jewish movement. Abortion is enshrined in the Talmud. I know people like Ben Shapiro like to say, being anti-abortion, being pro-life is a Jewish virtue. The reason that he is pro-life is because he's a bad Jew, not because he's a good one.
Yeah.
Because the Talmud is transgenderism and abortion, top to bottom. It's a book of witchcraft. So it's not surprising that he has this perspective, but we'll continue.
it would benefit everyone to bring back the family unit, to stop having women just thrown into the workforce.
Maybe we shouldn't allow women to choose to divorce unless their husbands say it's okay.
I mean, I don't really believe in divorce in general, so like, sure.
Cheers.
All right. I mean, this I think though reinforces my point that that if you are,
But it would be better for society. It would be better for
Christian theocrat,
everybody
then you
in
would be
society.
happy.
And same with xenophobic national. Like, what's the problem with xenophobic nationalism? Don't you think that's better for Americans in general?
To
Like
be
xenophobic,
xenophobic nationalism is better.
We should have a coherent culture. Everyone should be a part of the same culture. We should have assimilation.
Which do you get to choose what the culture is?
We already have a dominant culture.
What is?
We already have a dominant culture. So he's approaching this with the melting pot idea of, no, we need to, there's nothing unique about us. We're just, everybody's an American. They just haven't gotten here yet. There's no such thing as a predominant culture. Her response, spot on.
Yep.
Which do you get to choose what the culture is?
We already have a dominant culture.
What is
based
the
on
dominant culture?
European and Christian values and identity. That is the dominant culture.
White
It's
Christian-
rooted in European identity.
White. So your argument is
That
that
has been the dominant culture.
just to be
and
clear-
we're not letting people assimilate to that. We're saying you should keep your culture, and this is why our culture's so divided.
your argument is that Trump is good for those who want a dominant white European culture.
I mean, that is what America is. It's
So
Look
your
at the dude. Look at the dude putting
Yeah.
up the red flag. He's got the LA hat. Clearly, some form of
Mexican.
Yeah. Like, and he's just like, red flag.
Yeah,
I shouldn't have to assimilate. What is this?
Yeah, I'm already an American. I don't need to become an American, and I'm just as American as you or anybody else. Meanwhile, he's driving a pickup truck with tiny wheels that flies a Mexican flag.
Yeah,
right. It's like
and has a sticker on the back that says exactly which part of Mexico he's from.
Yeah, it has the state that he's from,
Yeah.
Emblazoned on the back. He's got something written in Spanish that nobody understands. El Toxica, La Toxica, or some nonsense like that from some Mexican TV show. It's like, you're obviously not a part of the culture, and you want to say, oh, melting pot this, melting pot that, but the melting pot obviously isn't melting this guy. So what is it melting?
Rooted in European identity and Christian values. That's what it has been.
It already exists.
Would you really disagree with that? What is it then if that's not the identity of America?
Well, I think the identity of America...
For the majority of time, America's been a country. You don't think that's been the identity?
Well, actually, no. I think actually the identity of America has been, for better or for worse, a melting pot in that regard.
Yeah, maybe since like the 1960s. Even
so, it's been a melting pot, guys. It's been a melting pot the whole time. That's one of the reasons. This clip here is one of the reasons that I grabbed this excerpt from what was his name? The Frenchman. Let's see, what was his name? Crèvecoeur. Is because frog face. The reason I grabbed this quote from this cheese eating surrender monkey is because he at the time was talking about this concept of melting pot, and he was like, yeah, I mean, it's a thing, but I kind of like the English. In the cities, in the coastal areas, you have this melting pot of English, French, German, Swedes, and Dutch, because the Dutch, founded New Amsterdam. They were a pretty prominent group. And yet they all turned into the race of Americans.
Yeah.
So even this idea of a melting pot had a starting thing into which they were melted, which was a race of Americans. And if you don't want to assimilate into a race, you will not melt into the pot. You will be a lump of coal in the gold that we are trying to smelt. You are not going to melt in. You are at best going to burn off into dross, because some things don't mix. Like our talk that we had earlier, in a previous show where we talked about, Vivek Ramaswamy and his barefootedness, and the train that goes through India where they're just dumping garbage off the train, just throwing it out the door. It's like some things don't, some stuff doesn't wash out.
Yeah.
Then, even we had this idea of a melting pot literally means assimilation too. It means melting. It means you're assimilating to the dominant culture. Is that not what melting means?
No, it doesn't.
And now instead we're saying there's something wrong with
No. Melting doesn't mean melting.
Yeah. No, it's more like a salad. It's the American Caesar salad. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Dominant culture. No. I mean, look, I got to be honest with you. You and I have a fundamental disagreement. We will never see eye to eye on this.
We have a fundamental disagreement. I will never melt into your pot.
Absolutely. That's exactly what he's saying.
That is exactly what he's saying. He's saying, melting pot, melting pot, melting pot. I will preach tolerance because when you are in power, I will preach tolerance because it is according to your standards. When I am in power, I will do what I want because it is according to my standards. I will never assimilate, but I will demand that you assimilate. I will never become an American, but I will demand that you turn into a post-war consensee.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, is your blood boiling yet?
I know, right? What's crazy about the post-war consensus is that a lot, the vast majority of the people holding to it are these people who don't have ancestors in America before the war.
Yeah.
It's that soon. That blows my mind, honestly, because I feel that if every single person had, we had so little immigration that I like this comment. That's a better way to put it.
He doesn't want us to be a melted pot. He wants us to be a tossed salad.
Yeah.
He likes tossing salads.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. And all the
American. Yeah. We need to start calling it that, the American tossed salad.
Yeah.
Not the American melting pot. But yeah, the fact that there are people in America who don't have a single ancestor who fought in at least the American Civil War. I mean, that's even that, like in a real assimilation, a real melt into, you would have
intermarriage at least to the point where
yes,
they would
to where
pick
you
up
just have
an
that one
ancestor.
guy,
Yeah.
one guy where you could say, this is my history as a person, that I
Well, I
have
mean,
blood that goes back to the beginning.
For example, my grandmother, as I've said, is a full-blood German. Post World War II, she marries my grandfather, who is a silent generation. He joined the army after the war and was stationed in Germany. She married him. She came over to the United States. She had children, and those children that she had, now my grandfather's ancestry is full blood American, but because of some interesting familial relations, we don't actually know his heritage. But my father married my mother. My mother's great grandfather came over to America after World War One. He was a German, and then he ended up fighting in World War II on the American side, and his name was Otto, and he had everybody call him George because he didn't want to sound too German.
Yeah.
But on my mother's side, I picked up all kinds of Confederate ancestors. I've got more than a handful. So that's a true assimilation. My father married, son of a German who married an American, marries an American. And what do I have? I have heritage on both sides. I have the Prussian nobility on one side of my family, and I have Confederate artillery officers, or artillery enlisted anyway, on the other. And it's like, that's a true melting pot. That's a true assimilation. I have become, by virtue of that intermarriage, a racial American. Yeah. But if you have these enclaves where people show up and they marry their kind, like you see in these Muslim enclaves in Michigan, these people coming from Muslim Africa, they're forming these enclaves, they're marrying their cousins. They're not American. Ilhan Omar is not an American, and her children are not American. I mean, she married her own brother. How un-American can you be, right?
Yeah, that's a trip. I remember asking one of my interpreters in Afghanistan. Well, actually, I wasn't the one who asked. It was our interpreter. He was showing pictures of his wedding, and it was cool. Like, it was like, getting to know this guy. He's a great guy, by the way. But I think it was my wife, my girlfriend at the time, but that asked, like, oh, how did you meet your wife? He's like, oh, it's my cousin. Excuse me?
What?
Yeah. What? And we're all just trying to look at each other like, hey, man, like, are you
straight face, man? Straight face.
Yeah, yeah, that's normal. That's totally normal. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just like this. Oh, okay, that's cool. Now I have another, another interpreter friend who I know from that time who absolutely rejects all that kind of stuff. So I'm not saying it's like all of Afghanistan's like that, but it was just like that culture.
It's very highly prominent.
Shock. Yeah.
Where everybody's familiar with the meme, in the US where it's like 1356, right? 13% of the population commits 6% of violent crime. In the UK, they have a similar meme, which is like 485. 4% of the UK population is 85% of birth defects. And it's because they have a Pakistani population that are all marrying their cousins and having awful, awful birth defects. And it's actually even worse than it is in Pakistan. Because in Pakistan, you have a lot of cousins to choose from. And in the UK, because they're a smaller community, they interbreed much more closely. And it's really, really bad. And things like that are, if they don't take measures to outlaw it, which is what they're trying to do right now, and the Muslims are up in arms about it, and their communist government is up in arms about it because they're bought and sold to the Muslim community. If they don't do something about it, it's not going to lead to good things. It's going to be bad for a long time, and it's not a self-correcting system. I mean, eventually it's a self-correcting system because they interbreed to the point where they can't marry. But the birth defects that they get from this cousin marriage, one of the primary symptoms is irrational violence. It's like, well, that's not
Yes.
that's so we have a Muslim community that's coming here, and then they're partaking in behaviors that will stunt them for life and turn them into irrational, violent psychopaths. That's not going to end well. That's not good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on the topic, I just have one more thing to share because everybody loves Doug Wilson. Yeah, everybody loves Doug Wilson. This is from an article that he wrote last year. Blog and May blog, Americanitis or Americanitas, which is how I'm going to pronounce it because it sounds more festive.
Yeah.
Americanitas. Anyway, the first thing he does in this blog is he wants to define what is an American. You know, are Americans a race? Are they an ethnos? Are they a people? And you know, Doug, he likes to play fast and loose with words. He likes to define things in such an obtuse fashion that he can say whatever he wants to. And sometimes his clever wordplay is very clever and quaint, and sometimes it's just annoying. And unfortunately, this article falls into the second. So yada, yada, yada. America does, you know, there's a school of thought that holds America is not really an ethnos in the biblical sense. You know, it's defined by lines on a map or a bureaucratic this, that, and the other. And he says, actually, I disagree with this. Now, he hems and haws to the point to where by the end of the article, he is agreeing with that. But he brings up this quote here from himself, but adapting the definition given by Stephen Bryant for ethnic identity in Cultural Identity and the Purpose of God, page 43, we would define a nation as a group with a shared name, a shared language, a shared sense of place, a shared history, a shared sense of belonging or kinship, which those things are not the same, by the way. Belonging and kinship are not the same. A shared set of cultural conventions and customs, and a widely shared set of beliefs and values. If we are defining nation, I would add to this an agreed upon matter of governance and decision making. With this understanding, America is a nation and not simply an enterprise zone, or as you and I would say, an economic zone with interchangeable cogs.
Yeah.
And then he says, not only is it a nation, but it is a distinct ethnos, Greek word for tribe or nation. So he's going back to Courrevant, or French Froggy Man, his definition where he said, you know, America is a race. There is an American race. It is the word used in the Great Commission where we are told to disciple the nations. So he's kind of proving too much here, because when the Bible talks about nations, it uses the word ethnos. And in our modern society, we want to bifurcate the two. We want to put a sharp separation between nation and ethnos. But in the biblical understanding, there are nations and tribes and tongues. And those things are, you know, there are ethnicities, there are tribes, and there are languages. Those are all things that separate by blood. When you read in the end of the book of Revelations, when the throne room is surrounded by the children of God who are worshiping him, they are nations, tribes, and tongues. One of the characteristics of ethnic groups is that they differ from each other. So even Doug Wilson, with all of his hemming and hawing, says, you know, you have permission to believe that the United States is an ethnicity. So to friends and family who perhaps have watched this video and are very upset by some of the things that I'm saying, I would like to point you to Doug Wilson, you know, who you love very much, you know, very, very wonderful man. He has given me permission to say that the United States is an ethnicity. And if the founding fathers said to us and our posterity, if the founding fathers saw themselves as an ethnicity, then I do not think that I should be ashamed to consider myself an ethnic American. So I will call myself a Native American, and I will consider myself as such forever.
There is. I'm trying to find the exact thing. There was a conference on missions that a bunch of Christians did. It was called the Lausanne Conference. I believe they've had a couple since then. And it was where a bunch of people came together and they said, we're going to define what needs to happen next with world missions. And they came up with some definitions to essentially differentiate from people groups so that they could say what people groups they had not reached yet and which ones they hadn't reached enough. And what they did was they would divide people by obviously like political borders, but then they would do things like language was a big one. So it wasn't that, oh, we've evangelized the whole world because we've had Christians in every single political boundary, which is up to, what are we at, like 250 something?
Yeah,
off the top of my
there are
head?
far fewer countries in the world than there are ethnicities.
Yeah. So what they did, they started dividing people up, and they would say, well, we haven't reached this people group because they speak a different language than the people group that we have reached within this political boundary. So they came up with all these things. All that to say, it's hilarious to me that a conference like that can come together and be able to define ethnicities and nations and peoples so accurately for the sake of reaching all these different people with the gospel that we now look at that I mean, if you just put that definition, I imagine you're looking for it right now while I'm talking about it. I couldn't find it. I had a teacher at California Baptist University who was like an expert on this stuff. And he was like one of the only professors who didn't have a doctorate. And he was like this huge deal in the worldwide community for missions. I can't think of his name right now, unfortunately. But he was a cool dude. And he was the one who taught me about the Lausanne Conference. But anyways, those people understand what it means to be a distinct people, because when it comes down to, we need to reach every single tribe, tongue,
Unreached
nation, and
people
people.
group. Yeah.
Yes, you have to reach all these people. You start to get into the minutia. You start to get into the details, and it's amazing to me that people today can't understand that these are different people. For instance, if we were to overlay that idea over America, right? If you don't speak English, you're not an American in the in a serious definition of what an American is, right? Americans speak English. Everyone knows that. Americans are the main reason that everyone else has English as a second language. It's not because of England.
That and the British Empire, but
well, but it's because of America.
Well,
let's be real. Like,
India is 1/3 of the world's population, and they speak English because of the British Empire.
Sure,
but everybody else,
I
mean, the people in Myanmar and the people in Sri Lanka. I mean, the reason they're speaking English is because they want to do trade with the United States.
Yeah. So,
but I mean, at the end of the day, the reason the United States speaks English is because of the British Empire. So it's still
correct.
British Empire all the way down.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah. But there's things like that, right? They would look at, say some missionaries came to America as we know it, and Christianity never existed in America, right? This is a very, very alternate history.
All right.
But they would come here and say they reached me and you. They would say, well, we reached the white English-speaking Americans. We reached that people group, but we haven't reached the African-American group. They speak English, right? That's the only language they speak most of the time. There might be some like Creole type African-Americans who speak French. I don't know if that even really exists, but I'm not an expert on that part of America. But
most Creole speakers in Louisiana are white, but
I figured,
there is a decent Black population there that do speak some Creole, but even the Creole language is being demographically washed.
Yeah. So there would be, there's guys that have walked into, when I used to work at the pawn shop. I think I've talked about that before. That was a crazy experience. There'd be guys that walked in and you're like, this is a Black guy for sure.
Yeah.
This is an African-American
You
guy.
don't even have to turn around. You can hear him speaking and you're like, that's
no. This is a totally different.
Oh, okay.
This is a totally different thing. They would walk in, you'd be looking at him face to face, you'd say, this is an African-American. And he would start speaking Spanish to you.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what is this? Oh, it's a Haitian guy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Which I understand genetically, there's connections, whatever, but like immediately it was like, whoa, this is a totally different kind of Black guy.
And
like,
this guy's not an African-American.
Right. So all that to say, there's all these different people groups within America that we understand that if we were to take it from that Lausanne Conference idea, everyone would understand it. Missionaries would come here and they would say, these are different people groups. We haven't reached this other people group. But then when it comes down to what is an American, well, it's,
everybody.
It's the whole world, but specifically the people who have gotten here already.
Mm-hmm. They crossed an imaginary line.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Unreal. I like this comment in the chat, so I'm going to pin that, but you can say whatever you want to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Doug Wilson is a fan of Chesterton, and sometimes he tries a little too hard to be Chestertonian. Chesterton is clever, but I think Wilson tries to be too clever by half. And oftentimes he will do things like what we saw in this article here, where he either does not prove anything or he proves too much. And looseness with words, no less a defect than a looseness of the bowels.
Yeah.
Well, playing fast and loose with definitions is not noble. It's not honorable. It's downright un-English. All right. Well, in the chat, I'm not seeing anybody pop in, but we'll give you a few minutes. It's been a long show. We've crossed the 2-hour mark, but we'll give people a few minutes if they want to comment anything.
While they're doing that, I do have a thing that is going on Facebook real quick. I thought is very interesting. It does kind of have it, and it is about the concept of Valhalla. Now, for those who don't know, that is the afterlife for a very specific kind of dead person within Norse mythology.
Yeah, you have to be a warrior who died in battle, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you absolutely had to die in battle. You had to be a warrior for sure. And I believe it was one of those things where like dying in battle automatically got you there, maybe. I mean, there's probably some minutia rules in there. But it is essentially the Viking Norse pagan idea of the afterlife, and it's a very specific afterlife. I think they had a totally separate afterlife for people who were just like peaceful, just whatever.
Yeah,
anyway,
it's very fun to read about, but I mean they had as many different afterlives as we would have, different occupations. Just about. It was quite complicated.
Okay, but so it got brought up in the context that a friend of mine on Facebook. I'm actually going to pull him up. I'm going to put him on blast.
Yeah, share the screen.
Yeah. Ooh.
Let it be said. Let it be done.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's go ahead and do it.
Shame, shame, shame.
Shame the non-believer. Let's see. Let's go ahead and talk about this. Is that going to work if I do this?
There we go.
Are you seeing me? Okay.
I see it. Yeah.
This is my buddy Chris New. He's a good guy. Brother in the faith. He says, super weird seeing professing Christian guys talk about going to Valhalla when they die. May as well say you're hoping to enter a state of nirvana rather than be reincarnated again. I had made the comment. Now first of all, I understand where he's coming from with this.
Yeah.
I also hate that Facebook has this most relevant thing. I wish I could turn it off because I never want what Facebook believes are the most relevant. I only want the all comments.
Yeah. And
anyways, I had said
you
this was a big
can't
thing in
change
the
it
Army.
to always
People
be
understandably
all
were
comments.
like, oh, okay, one person put a sad react. I understand why. And, people asking like, seriously, what? This guy only in Norway, right? No, unfortunately. Now, I agree with this. This is why I bring this up. Chad Lane here generally took it as a euphemism for heaven, right?
Yeah.
That is more or less what's going on. This guy's
it's not like these soldiers
Matt Campbell is bringing up a very specific company that talks about it.
Yeah, it's not like these soldiers.
All that to say, this is a particularly good joke here. Till Van Halen border. Quite like that one. Oh. Did I cut out? What happened there?
All right. Well, I don't know what happened there, but I got booted, and then I held on for a few minutes, and then you got booted. But
okay,
yeah. So I feel like these soldiers have like this super defined definition, like when they say, "I'll see you in Valhalla." It's not like they're being philosophical about it and being like, "Now Valhalla, this place where warriors go, as opposed to the Christian heaven." It's
yeah,
guys. This is a euphemism for heaven. They're adopting a foreign language to express a common understanding.
And I think it's a way of saying, like, we may die in this battle to come, but we're going to see each other on the other side. Now, is that theologically accurate? Probably not for the most part. It's something that we say to each other, even though... Now, I will say, like, I don't think I've ever said it in so many words, like, I'll see you in Valhalla or something like that. But the sentiment is always there, I guess. Like, it's not the most theologically accurate thing, but...
Yeah. I mean, and it's like in World War II, there was a common thing among soldiers that say, "See you in hell." And it's like, they're not literally saying, we're all going to die and go to hell.
Yeah.
I mean, those men were predominantly Christian, and they believed that after they died, they were going to heaven. But it was just a way of referring to the afterlife in kind of a flippant way, while also admonishing your brother to be valorous. I see no problem with that whatsoever.
There was a poem that came out of World War II. I don't know who it's attributed to, but it essentially was, when he gets to heaven to St. Peter, he will tell another soldier reporting, "Sir, I've spent my time in hell."
Yeah.
And again, not theologically accurate, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how bad your life was on earth. You're not just going to get like a free pass. Hell. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's okay. Just let me in. I had a bad life. I was abused, or I got killed in a war, or whatever.
The trenches were really bad, so you can't send me to hell. It's like, dude, if you're a murderer and a rapist, I don't care if you got drafted in World War I, you're not going to heaven.
Yeah. So all that to say, I guess my answer to that is, yes, you are 100% correct. It's not right to talk in that way, but I don't...
It's not right to talk seriously in that way.
Yes.
But it's not wrong to speak flippantly, I would say.
Yes. Yeah. Just like, what is there's a Greek version of that in the Bible, and I can't think of what it is. Hades. Hades is the Greek word that we use, that we translate hell, right? But Hades is literally the Greek bad guy place of the dead.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
or it's just the underworld. I don't... It's been a long time since...
It depends on what part of Greek history you're in as to what exactly the role of Hades is. But it's like, Hades is not the Christian concept of hell, and yet the New Testament uses the word Hades to define hell.
I think what it comes down to... So all that to say, again, to reaffirm, Christians don't believe in Valhalla, that there is a special place that warriors go to when they die or something like that.
Yeah.
I
We're
think
not
where
hailing Odin when we charge into battle.
Right. I think where it came from is this idea of wanting to be with people who lived the way you lived after you die.
Yeah.
Because there's
I want to spend my eternity among the valorous.
Right. Now there is no version of that in heaven. I fully admit that, you know, the bummiest, most useless, utilitarian wise, useless person on earth shares the same street corner in heaven as I do.
Yeah.
Like,
But, you know, the concept of heaven is something that I think is fun to talk about and to theorize about, because there's absolutely no reason that there won't be some sort of self-sorting in heaven.
yeah,
do you think there'll be like
you think there'll be like a VFW type thing? Freedom of association, yeah.
Do you think there'll be water fountains? No.
Yeah.
No.
The gated community within the pearly gates. Yeah.
But I mean, I think there will be times when it's like, you know, see, this is one thing I've thought about with the concept of languages and life experience and theology. It's like, man, when we get to theology, when we get to heaven, all our theology is going to be straightened out. You know, God's just going to flip a switch and we're all going to have right theology. I'm like, you know what? We're going to have an eternity to talk to each other and to God and the angels. There's absolutely no reason for him to flip the switch and just info dump into our brains. You know, he gave us minds that seek to discover a thing. And I see no reason why that would stop. You know, when we get to heaven, there's going to be different people of nations and tribes and tongues. You're going to have an eternity to learn every language. That doesn't mean that when you get to heaven, you're going to be able to understand everybody. No. You might get to heaven and find yourself between two Ethiopians and be like,
yeah,
hey, help me understand, guys. You know, what's your language?
Yeah.
Let me tell you my language. So I don't think the info dump view of heaven is correct. I think God's going to allow us to discover a lot of things on our own, but we'll do it with a perfect mind and with perfect love and patience in a way that we've never been able to do it before. So
and a 0% crime rate. So we won't have to deal with that aspect.
Yeah, and you know, I don't see any reason why people who are warriors wouldn't have podcasts like they do now, where it's just like a bunch of warriors sitting around a campfire talking about, you know, warrior-like things. You know, I think that there's going to be a place for that in heaven. And I know that's not a super deep theological position. And I know some people will take issue with that. Like, where did you find that in the Bible? It's like, well, I didn't. Okay.
C.S. Lewis has a really great, I guess, quote where he talks about, somebody had asked him, like, what if you and another person on the other side of the trench, because he was in World War One.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Am I understanding that right? Okay. Him and Tolkien were in World War One, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is honestly the gnarlier of the two. I think we love World War II just because technologically it's like the most we've ever thrown at each other. But World War One,
tanks and airplanes were awesome.
Yeah, World War One is just, I couldn't imagine living through that. Anyways, he was asked a question of like, what if a guy on the other side of the trench, what if you had like killed each other and you meet in heaven? Like, what would that be like? And he said, honestly, I think that we would laugh together. I think we would find it humorous. And that, man, the first time I read that was like really the first like Lewis thought, I guess, that really struck me as, man, that means something deep to me. Because just thinking about like, you know, some like goat herder Afghan dude that, you know, like blows you up or whatever. Like, dude, that would be like the crap talking point for all of eternity.
Yeah, it's like, right? Got you.
Like, yeah, like You remember that time where you drove like millions of dollars of technology into my home, and then I blew you up
Yeah.
easily with like
It'd be like
9-volt batteries and like, you know
and
what
a
I mean?
smoke alarm.
Yeah, like that. And I think that there would be something.
Yeah. Dude, I wish you could have seen it when you ragdolled up into the air 500 feet.
Yeah, I got it on video. Check it out. Yeah. I think there would be something to that. I think that people underestimate the saints' everlasting rest and how it doesn't matter what got you there anymore. Like you're there.
Yeah, and the idea of perfect, like I said before, it's like you're going to have this whole time to learn and understand with a perfect countenance, with a perfect mind, and perfect forgiveness. Like there's not going to be animosity. Like it's like that meme, right? Where you've got the guy who says the girl who says I'm not racist, and all her friends are white girls. Yeah. And the guy who says, yeah, I'm racist, and all his friends are like every ethnicity who say, yeah, we're racist. It's like, but they're saying, they're in Call of Duty lobbies calling each other racial slurs and they're friends.
Yeah.
Because it's not a point of animosity to them. They've got this perfect bond of brotherhood and forgiveness among each other.
Yeah.
And it's going to be like that, only more so, where in heaven, people aren't going to have animus. There's going to be no racial animus, but there are still going to be racial distinctions, and it'll only be all of the good parts with none of the bad parts. And that's going to be a wonderful thing to look forward to. Because I don't want everybody in the world to be, a medium shade of brown speaking English.
Yeah. Gray. Gray NPCs.
Yeah, and all in the United States, in one economy, one world economy, speaking one language. It's like, that's the Tower of Babel. God didn't like it then, he doesn't like it now.
Yeah. For the record, I just want to bring this up. This book here, Dunamai, I talk a lot about this. The idea of like, and those who have read it already know what I'm talking about. That's the sequel to this one here, Othello. I talk a lot about it because I think that's such a powerful idea. Enemies like meeting each other, and
having respect, mutual respect.
Yeah, I think that I heard a sermon years and years ago where the guy was talking about that he believed that Jesus picked his disciples based on opposites, just so that they could all kind of like not be the same in a way. So you have Simon the Zealot, and a zealot at the time was like a nationalist, basically.
Yeah.
At the time was like, I'm pro.
And a religious,
yes,
because their religion was so tied up with their nationalism,
And then you had Matthew, the tax collector. So
he's got no convictions.
Yeah, he's like the Uncle Tom of the disciples
of Judah. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, imagine those guys clashing, right? And then you've got just like, he had mentioned all these different ways. It was really interesting the way that he compared different disciples and like the backgrounds of like who we knew and like that kind of thing.
I wonder when he sent out the disciples 2 by 2, if he paired them up that way. It's like if you had Simon and Matthew paired up to go out, it's like, how much more convincing would the story be if it's like, wait a minute, you're a tax collector and you're a zealot, and y'all are both in agreement that this guy's the Messiah. It's like, that's going to turn some heads.
Yeah. And so another aspect of that same guy's sermon, speech, whatever it was, he was saying that he liked to believe that Jesus, like they'd be sitting around a campfire, 12 disciples, right? And he would just throw like verbally like a grenade out in the middle and just have them fight over it. Like, I want to hear let's hear you idiots, talk about how to solve this problem or whatever. And they're like mortal enemies. And like, that really resonated with me. And I think that is the, that we do want to reconcile with those people who are on the exact opposite side of the aisle. But at the same time, like we do also kind of want to connect with the people who are like us.
Yeah.
And it's a powerful thought. And I think that's kind of where the Valhalla thing comes from, is that we like this idea of, me and the homies get to be together in the afterlife.
Well, it's a blood bond forged in battle, and that's not a bad thing. All right. Well, we've been going for coming up on an hour and a half now. I'm not seeing anything in the live chat.
2.5 hours.
2.5. Yeah. Did I misspeak?
No.
Sorry. It's late. I'm tired. So 2.5 hours now. But for those of you who've stuck around, thank you for your participation. Hope you've been having a wonderful night. And we will see y'all next week. Have a happy rest of the Lord's Day. Get some rest, because this next week is going to be a day to do good works in. And if you don't have that, get a job. There's lots of stuff to do out there, and God does not. The fields are whitened to harvest, and there is no lacking of things to do. Anyhow, hope this has been a blessing to you. It's definitely been a blessing to me, and this has been a wonderful time. And we will see you next week, same time, same place. 7:30 Central. We'll love to see you then. Have a good one. Good night.